Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to HOTFIX. So today, we're going to talk about the topic above our head, which is Game of the Year. What exactly does it mean? Although that could be sort of viewed as, what does GOTY mean? I kind of just explained that, Game of the Year. But I've got some, the reason behind this topic is obviously it's a new year. So there's been a load of so-called Games of the Year. I'm doing, aerial commas, Mr. Kirioth, whatever they are called.
Game of the Year.
You need to do it a bit close to your head, else nobody can see. I'll let you have another go.
Game of the Year.
Oh dear,
that didn't work at all.
So the thing with this is, right, the reason why this topic popped up is because Game of the Year is a strange thing, Mr. Kirioth, because what actually is Game of the Year? Well, on paper, you might ask a fellow on the street and say, "Good day, sir. I'm stopping you to take a short survey. What does Game of the Year mean to you?" And they'd look at you straight in the eyes and they'd say, "Well, Game of the Year surely means the best game of the year." And you would go, "Okay, sir. Okay," and walk away and get another victim.
Thank you very much. On your way. Congratulations.
But the question is, Mr. Kirioth, what is Game of the Year?
Well, this year, and this will serve to,
He means 2013 as well. So
yeah,
last year.
Sorry, last year. Not this year. It would be a bit early to pick one this year. Someone has to be mental to do that. Last year, I have here a list of games that won Game of the Year. And this, hopefully, should illustrate the point that it's not really all that helpful of a title for a game. So we have, and this is in order of the publications that I looked at, which I won't name because we'll be here all day, but I'll just give you the list. Stop me if you get bored. So, we have GTA 5, The Last of Us, GTA 5, Black Ops 2, lol, GTA 5, Super Mario 3D World, The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, GTA 5, The Last of Us, Legend of Zelda, Last of Us, GTA 5, The Last of Us, GTA 5, The Last of Us, GTA 5. Now,
where are they from?
Everywhere, son.
Okay.
Everywhere. I can provide the source, which you will be able to find in the description. Because this is a quality outfit.
It doesn't matter. No, that doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is, where are they from? This is the thing. Because there is no central governing body which says this is Game of the Year. And this is one of the biggest problems. If you look at the movie industry, right, you've got the Oscars. Now, I don't care how they come to the conclusion of this film is Best Picture or whatever, but generally, throughout that industry, if you win the Oscar for Best Picture or Best Male Lead or Best Female Lead or whatever, you generally are considered by almost all of the critics, or the majority of them, the best in that category for that year, okay? Problem with Game of the Year is there is no governing body. So there is nothing. It's like, Mr. Kirioth, I am going to give Game of the Year to the first game that comes into my head, and it's the official Unit Lost Game of the Year. Now, if you want to put that on your game, then that's fine. You've won Game of the Year from me.
A high honour.
And that is kind of the problem. So this list you've just hit us with, the list you've just hit us with is
basically irrelevant, is what it is, because it's not. It's just anyone who's got a website that describes itself as a review website can name any game as Game of the Year, and that kind of dilutes the meaning a bit, because if you're not a fan of that website, that tag is not. For people who know, for people who play video games all the time, who live it, who read the news every day, that it's not really much of a big thing. A game winning Game of the Year. It's like, oh, okay. But to your man on the street, if you say, what is the Game of the Year? And they say, well, the Game of the Year is obviously the best game of that year. And then they go into a shop and they see a game that has won Game of the Year. They will assume that it is the best game. But, that's just for one site. For another site, it could be a totally different game. I mean, one of the sites named Black Ops 2. And everyone else was picking Last of Us and GTA 5. So, what the hell? Did that guy only play Black Ops 2? That's the other thing as well. Where's the knowledge? Where's the example of the person who's picking that game?
This is the problem. You've totally hit the nail on the head. This is the problem, because you don't from the list you read off there. I was getting The Last of Us a hell of a lot, right? I've not played The Last of Us, so I can't comment on the game. But if, let's say, those websites were, for whatever part of a a larger group which comes to the conclusion, like a governing body, that this game will be Game of the Year, it would probably say The Last of Us is Game of the Year, because all of these people are saying The Last of Us. Now, there are a couple of problems with this, like, and quite big problems, because games are in a very different genres. Now, I know films can be in different genres as well, but games, it's even more diverse, because let's say you take somebody who really likes sports games, okay, or even a website that likes sports games, it would say most likely FIFA 13 or 14 or whatever the hell it was last year. That is Game of the Year for them, and it might well probably be, okay? So then, if another game which is an RPG is Game of the Year, and another game which is an FPS is Game of the Year, there's no, like, what I'm getting at is there is no singular Game of the Year, and I don't think it would be even possible to do that. And
you could, you could have, if it was split into categories, so it was like RPG of the Year or something.
Kind of like the Oscars, what they do, yeah, to some extent.
Yeah, that to me would work, but as it stands, it's like any random site picks from either its editors, its readers, or just one person which game they liked most and name that Game of the Year. And it being their Game of the Year has no bearing on what kind of game it is, or anything. It's just nothing like that. It's like that's the weird thing for me, where it's like someone named Black Ops 2 and someone else named Super Mario 3D World Extraordinaire, whatever it was called. That
totally
those
different.
Are two games are not even in the same. They're not the same genre. They've not got the same focus. They've not got the same anything.
Well, like you said, though, why is that? Like you basically totally hit the nail on the head when you said, well, when the average consumer goes into the shop on the high street and he sees, or even looks at Steam, because let's be honest, a lot of games are digitally delivered now, and sees a little tag which says Game of the Year, right, on the box or wherever, and thinks that's probably a good game because it's Game of the Year. What they don't look at is that it's Game of the Year from Kotaku. Or it's Game of the Year from
Official Nintendo Magazine.
Official Nintendo Magazine, yeah, which has given Zelda Game of the Year, or Mario. Well, no shit, they're in-house studios. Of course, it's going to do that, But there's a lot of that goes on. But I use my mother as an example. If I got on the phone to my mother and I was like, "Hello, mother, buy me a game," and she went into the shop, she would be like, so she goes into Game, which is a UK retailer, and says, "I'm after a game for my son. He plays on the PC. What do you have?" And the guy would be like, "Well, this won Game of the Year last year, and this did, and this did." And she'd be like, "Oh," and she'd pick one and give it to me, and it'd be something like Dead Island. And I'd be like, "This is not Game of the Year, mother. Take this back right now." But it was Game of the Year for somebody. And this kind of like, when you see, like, I think PlanetSide 2 did this, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, we've won like hundreds of awards prior to the game coming out. All these game conventions and shows and things. We've won best FPS in show, best this, best that, off like loads of websites." And some of them, I am not joking, guys, were completely random. Like Unit Lost is a much bigger outfit than some of them, and it's just like, what? So what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go to Eurogamer, walk around with a sticker. "Congratulations, you've won the Unit Lost FPS fucking Medal of the Year." And they'll be like, "Oh, great!" And they can add that to their website, because that's all that's happening. There's nothing.
Yeah.
But the marketing people at the publishers are like, "You know what? We can really take advantage of this," and I think that's what they're doing, basically.
Well, yeah, because that's the other thing. It's not just that Game of the Year by itself is frankly a little bit meaningless because it's so scattershot and so random as to who picks what, but also there doesn't seem to be any sort of restriction on games like taking the review from, I don't know, computer and video games for the weekend.net or whatever, and saying, well, they've given us Game of the Year, and then producing a Game of the Year edition, which is like... Because you see that, like, and actually you mentioned a perfect example of this, Dead Island, right? Dead Island came out, it was buggy as all hell. It was mangled, like, it was broken. It was not finished. It was not a particularly great game. It was okay, by all accounts. Critics did not think it was particularly great.
Yeah, it was mediocre.
Users did not think it was it was just an okay game that had too many bugs. They brought out a Game of the Year edition. Now, to your man on the street, that is like, "Oh, this game's got Game of the Year. I'll buy it." Well, congratulations, you've bought a still buggy mess. It's not... That doesn't mean anything. Game of the Year edition has no meaning when it's attached to games that have not won Game of the Year. But then, since so many games win Game of the Year, and it's completely random as to what they might be, you can almost forgive them for it because it's like, who the hell's going to check, really?
But what about this? I think this is another thing as well. They do. It is a random tag, but it's a tag that has some value. This is the thing with it. This is the problem. Like, there's no regulation to it. Anybody can give it, but once a game has got it, it makes that game kind of more valuable, right? So it's like win-win for the developers and the publishers. But I think, like, going back to talking about different types of categories, and, like, you know, you can't just have a game which is game of the year, like this magnificent game which has been made, and it's better than everything else, because that is just like an impossibility, yeah? Because, like, you compare this back to movies again. Everybody watches movies on the same thing. You watch them on a TV. You know, you either watch them on a Blu-ray, DVD, or you go to the cinema. Gaming, however, is broke across so many different systems and platforms. It's very difficult to say that's game of the year unless you've played every single game. And that's a problem, right? But then if you think about it again, well, actually, I'll just go back to the first point I was trying to make. There are some websites that are, and YouTube channels as well, doing this, where they break down their game of the year into different categories. So they would have, you know, the best sports title of the year, the best multiplayer indie game, the best single player indie game, the best indie game, the best, you know, whatever. They're really breaking them down, and that makes more sense than just coming out and going, hey, check this out. And you know what this kind of ties into as well? Game reviews, which game reviews now, in my eyes, well, and for a long time, especially ones that have got scores, because if you go to IGN, Polygon, places like that, we give this 8 out of 10. Well, you give everything 8 out of 10, right? But that review score is the same as a Game of the Year award, if you think about it. To me, it holds completely no weight, because I'm just like, what's this, like, figure you've come up with? Where's this come from? What does this mean? It doesn't mean anything to me, but to the average gamer, it might mean something to them. Oh, well, look at this. Polygon gave that a 9 out of 10. It must be a good game. I must get that. And that's what annoys me. And I think, like, with the idea with reviews, they're so personal. It's like, I mean, okay, me and you, Mr. Kirioth, let's think of a game that I like but you don't like. So, well, StarCraft 2 is a good example. I like StarCraft 2 multiplayer. You like StarCraft 2, but you don't like the multiplayer. But if you were to ask me, what do I think is the best multiplayer game? RTS at the moment, so even we break that down into categories, or even you may answer StarCraft in that respect. But I'd say StarCraft 2, and you'd be like, that would be like my game of the year for multiplayer RTS. For Kirioth, it might be something different. It might be Warhammer Dawn of War 2. You know, it could be anything. And it's like, the major issue I've got with this, it is so, like, broad. Oh, it annoys me, Mr. Kirioth, because I think people are literally getting conned on it. I hate it. I hate it. It's crazy.
For me, it's a combination of two things. The first thing is the fact that, as it stands, Game of the Year as a title doesn't really hold any meaning because it is so widespread and it's just based on any random person's opinion of any random game. At least that's how it feels. And when you look at lists of Game of the Year, the fact that you've got these anomalies like Black Ops 2, like Super Mario, compared to a lot of other places voting for GTA 5 and The Last of Us, that kind of pinpoints the fact that it's not really a trustworthy title, because it appears there's always going to be a couple of people who are like, yeah, no, I just like shooting people in the face. Which is like, that's fine if you like that, but I wouldn't describe a game that is involved, you know, that purely has that as being Game of the Year. The other thing that I don't like is the fact that not only is Game of the Year kind of meaningless, but it's only kind of meaningless to the people who sit there and read all these reviews and look up all these games and play as many games as they possibly can. So basically people in our position, or like really hardcore nutters for any new game that comes out. Because any game, apparently, can just take the words Game of the Year, stick it on the box and call it Game of the Year Edition. So, I mean, for example, there's Dead Island, Game of the Year Edition. It wasn't Game of the Year. I don't know who gave it Game of the Year. I'd love to know if someone actually did, or whether they made it up.
Two Worlds 2 got Game of the Year edition as well. Now this is it's like an RPG game. I think it's third person. I think you might be able to play in first person, but I think it's a third person RPG. It isn't bad, right? I played a bit of this, and it isn't bad, but you can tell it's a small budget game. You know, like by the way certain things are done, it's a little bit cheap and stuff like that. There is no way that is Game of the Year. I mean, I think this game came out. I may be wrong, but I think this came out like around the same time as like Witcher 2 came out and things like that. You know, these are games that are much better, much more, you know, again, in my opinion, but they are better, polished games. I may be wrong off the ears, but just for Pete's sake or whatever, just fucking use it. It doesn't matter. But I think, like, how could that have won Game of the Year? Like, and we just keep coming back to the same thing, where it's very difficult to say what Game of the Year is without any kind of governing body. Whereas in the movie industry, you can say that was the best film of the year. It might not be a film you personally enjoy, but critics overall like it. Okay, so let's say you like sci-fi films or action films. So Expendables 2 is your film of the year, okay? But me, because I like, I don't know, fucking romantic comedies, right? I like some other shit, yeah? And like to me, that's the best game of the year. So even there, you can break it down. But the major difference is there is this body which says, "Look, this is what's going on." And I don't think there can ever be that with gaming. And I honestly, I don't know whether I even want that. Even though like most of this video, this discussion, I've kind of been saying maybe there should be a governing body, but I'm not even sure it would make any difference because people are very personal, Mr. Kirioth. Look at us. Why do people follow us? Because they like what we say. They enjoy the same things we enjoy. Why do people follow other YouTube channels? It's the same thing.
Yeah. The thing is, I think the other thing as well is that for me, games are a lot more of a personal thing than films because a game is something you properly interact with. You don't just sit there and watch it. It's not a passive experience. You have a direct impact on the world of the game you're playing. Even if it's only a linear story, the act of you performing the actions on behalf of your character means that you are directly involved in that story.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, I still think Dragon Age Origins might be my favourite game of all time, but there are other people who did not like it. But to me, that's fine. Because I like that kind of game, and I really enjoyed that kind of experience. There are people who will probably say, well, what the hell are you talking about? Surely Dark Souls is better. Now, I really enjoy Dark Souls, but I enjoy Dragon Age a little bit more. But that's where it comes down to personal preference. That tiny little difference in what kind of RPG you like makes the game of the year.
You would still say both are game of the year, though. This is the thing. They came out in different years. You could say they're different. One's action RPG, the other one kind of is a little bit, but but you could both.
But that kind of highlights the difference, because we've got like the big thing is that this is the game of the year. I know sites do break it down, but generally speaking, there is usually a game that is the game of the year. It's like everyone should play this game. You, who only ever plays racing games, you should play this game. I don't see how you can apply anything like that to gaming because it's not that type of medium. It is not something where anyone can pick up any game and enjoy it because people they're always going to have inbuilt preferences. You're not telling me that someone who sits there and plays Black Ops multiplayer obsessively for hours on end every night is going to accept that, like, I don't know, say The Last of Us is game of the year. They wouldn't, because that's not their personal preference. And because you are that much more involved in games than you are in films.
This goes deeper. This goes way deeper, though, because, I mean, you can use... We'll use the movie example again. The people who are deciding what is the best film of the year, best picture, Oscar and whatever, it's still their opinion at the end of the day. And, like, that is where, and this kind of ties into what we're doing on YouTube at the moment and all the rest of that, that's why this so-called new media is so addictive to people, because you can really tailor your experience. So if you really enjoy the games we enjoy, you follow our channel, you may follow our website and all the rest of that, and you get information that you enjoy, okay? Let's take somebody who plays grand strategy games. I'm pretty sure they would say Europa Universalis 4 was their game of the year last year by a mile, an absolute mile. Yeah. Maybe Crusader Kings 2, which I think came out earlier in the year. It might have even come out the year before. But they would most likely say it was EU4, right? That person likes grand strategy games. They would not say their game of the year is whatever it was, for somebody like use the Black Ops example, for somebody who likes bloody FPS games. It would be totally different. But that now there is an environment where you can go out and specifically get the information you want. And I think that I've said this quite a few times, but it is the nail. Well, no, you hit the nail on the head, but this is the nail in the coffin for this type of game of the year thing, where it cannot possibly be. You cannot have a game of the year. Yeah, sure, places can say game of the year because they and publishers can stick it on their box because they know it's going to sell the game, but it has no meaning. And this is the overriding message I want to give you guys watching this video. Do not buy something because it is game of the year. I mean, Batman, Arkham Asylum, and I think Arkham City, game of the year editions. Great games, right?
Yeah.
They've got game of the year editions, but it's like, it doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? Maybe it means they can keep the price artificially high, although that does go for real cheap anyway. So Unless like £3.80 is artificially high, then maybe not. Because I'm sure it goes really cheap in Steam sales. But you see what I mean? Like, there's a ton of different.
Yeah,
it's
effectively.
Do not trust Game of the Year.
Yeah, it's effectively a marketing strategy, is what it is. Game of the Year editions are effectively just marketing. Now, if a game won Game of the Year, and if you went to their website and said this is one Game of the Year, that's kind of different to it having it plastered all over the front. I mean, the Batman Arkham Asylum cover, Game of the Year edition cover, is famous for being so insanely over the top with praise. It's got like 10 out of 10 stamped all over the corner. There's millions of little things all over the place saying, oh, Batman was the best game I've ever played. Oh, one of the best games this year. The best game this year. All that kind of thing. That is just marketing. That is there to blind you into buying something that you might not otherwise buy. Now, that's okay, because you might get a good experience out of it, but if you're sensible, if you know what you like and you know how you enjoy your games, Game of the Year is totally meaningless, because whether or not it's one Game of the Year, you can do your research, you can read the reviews, you can watch the videos, you can see the gameplay. I totally agree. And come to a conclusion yourself.
What about this then? What about this?
What is the purpose?
What about games specifically designed to win Game of the Year? Right, so what about... I know this happens... Like, this is with the movie example again. I know there's like a phrase, and that's Oscar bait. So this is something which is designed to win Oscars, you know, because it's sort of flavour of the year. They know it's going to... let's say Hurt Locker. That was Oscar bait, right? Because I think it won an Oscar. I think it did.
Yeah.
About the bomb disposal, the IED disposal in Iraq. Now, why did that win an Oscar? Because everybody, you know, it's a very sensitive issue. A lot of people know about the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So you could say that was potentially Oscar bait. It was a good film, though, but you could say it was Oscar bait. Now, look at games, right? Last year, a game called Gone Home, pretty much universally, and Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, got massive praise from loads of places, yeah? A lot of websites I read, like Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, various other YouTube channels that I watch, they would say either Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, or more predominantly, Gone Home is Game of the Year. Now, let's just talk about Gone Home a moment, because Gone Home is just an FPS. Well, it's not an FPS, it isn't the shooter. It's just a first-person, just a first-person like puzzle game in a house, and I'm pretty sure the story revolves around like a mid-90s white kind of family, you know, type of thing that most of the video game journalists at the moment probably lived through. You know, they're in like their mid to late 30s now. So when you give this game to these people who can influence the sales of your game, and they're like, oh, this is great, everybody should play this is Game of the Year. I ask you, would it have been the same result if it was a totally, like if it was an Asian family in Hong Kong in that time period?
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. Now, Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons is kind of the same thing. They know Journey was pretty much given Game of the Year all the time. Now, I've not played Journey, so I can't comment on that, but I do know it's like a story-driven experience, you know, linear story-driven experience, emotional, takes you on a ride and all this crap. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, I've played that, and I think that's the same thing, even though I've not played it, but from what I've read, it's the same sort of thing. Let's get emotional, let's go on this journey, and you get some fairly prominent people saying this is a great game. People with big audiences, this is Game of the Year. And I'm thinking, no, it isn't. That really isn't Game of the Year. What is that? It's, in my eyes, it's not Game of the Year. So again, this goes back to the whole thing. You cannot call a game Game of the Year because it's a personal preference. But I do think, Mr. Kirioth, there are certain games which are designed to provoke reactions out of the people who are behind the certain websites and YouTube channels and all the rest of it.
It's one of those things where it's kind of a weird, not problem, but issue in that they're designed specifically to appeal to a certain subset of people who they know will give it praise, which will, you know, result in it becoming more well known. And that's kind of, on the one hand, that's kind of okay, because they've got to produce an experience that they know certain people will like. So there's going to be a market for it, which is, you know, that's the whole. You don't want to make a game that no one's going to play. But I feel like there are some games that receive praise, that they receive praise not because they're good games, but because they've got good stories, or they're good at, you know, pulling on your heartstrings, or they've got a good message. for me, for a game to become, my favourite game of the year, not the game of the year, the game I most liked out of that year, it's got to have everything. And I'm getting the increasing feeling that that's not going to be the case. That people will, studios, developers, publishers, they will chase a certain subset of people who are in a position to say, this game is brilliant, you should try it. Only it's not really a full-on gaming experience.
What you're trying to say is these people are sort of saying you need to experience this game, experience the story sort of thing, and go through that. But, I mean, that could still be classed as a game. I get what you're saying, though. Like, I mean, for me, a game is something that you're going to keep coming back to, or, well, it doesn't even have to be that. It's something that you enjoy. So you can still say, well, okay, that is an enjoyable experience. Maybe Gone Home is an experience. I think, like, for me, it's sort of a little bit before my time, but I would still probably understand most of the references, because I remember when I was at high school, we had tape players. We didn't have MP3 players and iPods, or we didn't even have mobile phones until practically year 10 and above, which is like, you sort of getting to the end of the school term. And even then, they were massive and terrible, but they had Snake, which was bonus. But I don't know. I don't know. I think that is a very interesting point, though, this whole, like, a game designed for Game of the Year. Like, if somebody made it, like, if Star Citizen came into existence now, right, and had everything they said, that would be Game of the Year off me. I would just say that's Game of the Year. Because that's a game I really want. Like, I'm really looking forward to that. But Johnny down the street, he might like sports games, and he don't give a crap about that. And it's not Game of the Year to him. And that's where the problem lies. And I think,
actually, you've kind of... You've hit on the same thing that we said earlier there with like things like Gone Home and Two Brothers and everything. That it comes back to that same thing of it is way too subjective. There might be people who are developing games purely to win Game of the Year, but the problem with Game of the Year as a concept
but
is...
hang on. The thing with that is, though, bloke, they are doing it because they know the people who can write the reviews have got a massive audience. So if I make a game, if I know somebody intrinsically and I do research on them, you can kind of guess how they will react to a certain thing. So you can say, I know this massive YouTube channel will say this is Game of the Year if I do this. I know this massive website will say this is Game of the Year if I do this, because I know the majority of people who work there will most likely like this. It's that type of shit. Like, and you could say that's really cynical of me, but I think that a degree of that does go on. I think we started to see this from games like Dear Esther, which I don't think that won particularly tons of games of the year. I don't think it won any, but this type of story-driven... Yeah, well, you could say Brothers wasn't a game. I mean, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, okay, it was a puzzle game, but it was a very simple puzzle game, and I mean a really simple puzzle game. You're just playing through a story. Journey, you're just playing through a story. Gone Home, you just... okay, you are solving puzzles and stuff, but I don't know.
Well, I think that's where the big problem comes in. We can't. I don't want there to be a central authority for who gets Game of the Year, but at the same time, that's the only thing that would give it any sort of worth, because you could have a category of story-driven game in which Journey, Brothers, Gone Home, they would be perfect candidates for that, because you are basically playing an interactive story.
We'll see more
on gameplay elements, but
this year we will see more.
That's the problem.
We will see more, because look at the last couple of years. You've got Journey, Game of the Year. They're all saying Gone Home, Game of the Year. Brothers, great Game of the Year, and all this crap. I think this year you'll see it again. It'll be another indie game. It won't be a massive AAA release, because a lot of them are getting pretty much misguided now. But I think that's what we're going to see, more of a, I don't know. But I mean, shit. We played what's it called? Nidhogg. That's the best 2D indie multiplayer brawler I've played this year. Game of the Year.
This is true. Yeah. It's just...
I also happen to be pretty good at it, but whatever. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to leave it at that. I want to know what you think about Game of the Year. Do you think it's even worth having a Game of the Year? Do you buy things that are Game of the Year? Do you think there should be a central governing body? Do you think we even need Game of the Year?
Yeah. And also, what do you reckon of Game of the Year editions on games that clearly
not Game of the Year?
Not Game of the Year. Worms Revolution, that's got Game of the Year edition. That no way in hell did that ever win Game of the Year. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
My chair's falling apart. You hear it? Well, I think Worms, the first one, that was definitely worthy of Game of the Year whenever that came out.
Tomb Raider's got a Game of the Year edition. actually. Looking at this list of Game of the Year edition games that you can get, Tomb Raider has a Game of the Year edition. I don't think Tomb Raider won Game of the Year last year, partially because Last of Us probably completely destroyed it, and GTA 5 came out. So why has that got a Game of the Year edition? It's just, it all feeds into the same thing. It doesn't mean anything.
Does not mean anything, guys. Does not mean anything.
In which case, ignore it. Just focus on whether you actually think you'll like the game, not the fact it says Game of the Year on it. Dear God, it's irritating.
So there you go, guys. You know what we've just said. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave your comments below. We've been Unit Lost. If you like the video, then like the video, favourite it, share it, and do all that stuff. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Unit Lost Gaming. Follow Kirioth. He is at Kirioth. And go to unitlost.com and subscribe to our forums because they are magnificent. El Magnifico. And we'll catch you next time, people. Toodaloo.